Well, good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
If I have not met you, my name is Kristi Northup, and I have the privilege, along with my husband Wayne, we serve as the lead pastors here at Saints Community Church. And he is at our Bell Chase location preaching this morning because Pastor Daniel is on vacation, and we value vacation around here. So he's over there, yes, all the vacation lover stuff. That's good. We're one church in multiple locations. Our mission is reaching imperfect people to follow a perfect Jesus. How many say that includes me? Amen? If you're here for the first time, just take a look at that QR code on the back. You can scan it, and we just want to be able to be in touch with you, have some gift for you, want you to be able to just get familiar with who we are and what we do here and see how we can be a blessing to you. This message is part of the final week of a series called Money Talks, which is a funny title because most people don't like to talk about money. We can say, oh, how many kids do you have? Oh, I have 3. I already work here. How long have you been married? How much money do you make? I mean, that's not like a question that you should be asking or feel comfortable answering. So there's kind of an elephant in the room. People have a range of emotions, especially when we talk about money in church, because sometimes churches, preachers have brought it on themselves why it's awkward for people, or there's been high pressure, or there's been mismanagement, or whatever it is. So sometimes the church deserves it, and you might be thinking, how great. I came on Money Sunday, or even better, I brought a friend on Money Sunday. But the reason that we're going to talk about it today is because Jesus talks about money a lot. Actually, 40% of his stories, sermons, have something to say about money. And why is that? Jesus never took up an offering. He never, the only time he asked for money, he kind of did this magic trick and then gave it back. It was an interesting thing. But it's because he understood what it represents. And to many of us, money represents security. It represents peace. It represents margin and options. But what's funny about it is that money doesn't actually accomplish any of those things except maybe giving us options. It can't actually give us security. Some of us have more money than we've ever had, maybe more money than we ever thought we would make, maybe in a better position than our parents ever were, and we have never had more anxiety about it. And so it doesn't give us peace. It doesn't necessarily give us security or hopefully, maybe some margin if there's some there. I remember when I was working as a banker at Capital One, I had a customer who would come in from time to time, and this gentleman had $800,000 in his checking account, which is a lot. It's a lot. It's not the safest. Don't recommend it. There's lots of other places you can put it. And I remember him being among the most anxious customers I had about, did he have enough? Was he going to make it? What was he going to do? It was going to get taxed. And I remember just sitting there thinking, wow, I have more peace than this guy because I know I gave away more money this year. So even with him having that much money in his checking account, it still was not giving him security or peace or any sense of margin or options. So because of that, since Jesus addressed money, we should address it as well. And if you're here this morning and you're not a Christ follower, listen, I'm not here to coax you to give, but instead I just want you to try to see this as an opportunity to understand how surrendered followers of Christ approach money. Because we're going to talk about a parable, and it's going to teach about a story that has a principle that is true. And when we live by something that's true, there's freedom in that. And so I think even if you're not a Christ follower, you're going to love it. And if you're a believer, this is for you. This is what we get to do. This is what the Lord is asking of us. So let's pray. Lord, I just thank you for your word. And I thank you that we can be together here today. And I just pray that we would receive what your word has to say. Let it be in your name, Jesus. Amen. So here at Saints Community Church, we have two areas of focused giving. One is called the tithe. And if you were here last week, you got to hear a message about the tithe. And the other is kingdom builders. And so the tithe comes from the Hebrew word masair. It means the first tenth. Tithing just means giving the first 10% of whatever God has blessed me with. The tithe is also, it's described as God's system for arranging life around Him by putting Him first. It really does make a difference when that is the first place. Because that's part of what makes money hard to talk about, is because it's held so dearly, because it represents our time, our sacrifice, our work. And so when we put it first, put God first in the rightful order, there is a surrender there that brings peace. Malachi 3:10 says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house." So this explains the three parts about tithing. The first thing is the position, which is first. It's the first 10%. So it's not the leftover. It's not a tip. It's the first 10%. And that's the second part, is the percent. The third thing is the placement, which is through the local church. Because when people tithe through the local church, systems and life and community begins to work in the way that it is supposed to work. So tithing is biblical obedience with our resources. It's the first step in faithful financial stewardship. But today what we get to talk about is moving beyond obedience into generosity. And after you take that first step, we ask people to move past just obedience into the next step, which is generosity. And generosity is defined as doing more than what is required. Well, I like to explain it like this: open hands. My hands are open, Lord. Matthew 10:8 says, "Freely you have received, freely give." There is a freedom that comes from giving and having our hands open and allowing God to use our resources in the way that He wants to, because it's amazing the way He multiplies it in our lives and the lives of others. So kingdom builders is that second way. Kingdom builders, if you're not familiar with that, the kingdom is the kingdom of God. So what I like about it is it's bigger than just us, because our giving should not just directly impact things that impact us. The great thing about giving is when we get to give to places we will never go, people we will never meet, because God's kingdom is so much bigger than what we see just connected to Saints Community Church. So it involves giving over and above the tithe. We have three areas that our Kingdom Builders projects represent. And if you want to take a look later along the back wall, every year we have our Kingdom Builders projects. So we have global projects that impact the spreading of the gospel all over the world, important projects like human trafficking, things that are global. It also impacts local community projects, so things like Second Harvest and a foster care initiative and our public schools. And then it's also future expansion projects. So that means doing things that help people come to the Lord. And doing things that build up leaders and give opportunity. And so those are the three areas: global, local, future. So I just want to give you an update. Our Kingdom Builders goal for this year is $175,000. As of Thursday, the church has given, we've all given together $43,979. So put your hands together. That's about 25% of the way to the goal, which by this time last year, we had given more, but honestly, I don't sweat it, because it's kind of amazing the way the Lord brings it in the second half of the year. And honestly, this is one of my favorite things that we do here at Saints Community Church, because like I said, we should give in a way that does not exclusively benefit ourselves. And so that's what I love about it. And I just want to mention a few of those projects that are still not fully funded. Each month we mention a project, but some of them, we've had a lot of emergency crisis stuff this year, some flex giving, projects that were one-time things that came up. And so a few of our bigger projects are not fully funded. So Venture, which we talked about at the beginning of the year, they focus on places that are unsafe, unreached, unreached and underfunded, yes. So unsafe meaning war, human trafficking, extreme poverty, persecution. Unreached means fewer than 2% of that population has even heard about the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Underfunded means less than 1% of Christian giving goes toward those parts of the world. So it is an international project, mostly focused in the Middle East and beyond. And then another project that I feel really excited about is our public school project. So critical time is coming where it gets cold. And as you know, we are not always well equipped here to deal with the cold. And there are so many kids that come to school without sweatshirts. And last year, we gave, I think, 100 sweatshirts to a school in the East that Pastor Daniel has done some subbing at. And that just touches my heart so much to think of how that is touching individual kids. This year, through some different crisis things, we have actually built a really good relationship with T.H. Harris, the middle school, which is actually where Saints Community started. That's part of why it's really special to us. There's just a couple blocks from here. And their social worker called me one day, I want to say it was like January. And he said, Miss Kristi, he said, we have a student who came, they're living alone in the house. His shoes are broken, 13 years old. His shoes are broken. He's in shorts. It was 38 degrees that day. And he said, I cannot, in good conscience, send him home without shoes and some pants. Would you be able to, is that something Saints Community Church could help us with? And I was so honored that he felt like he could call and reach out to us on a project that. We went to Old Navy. We got him pants, belt, underwear, socks. I'm like, if his shoes are broken, his socks aren't going to work. And so we got our shoes. And so that confidence between our local schools, our public schools, and our church. Because if this church disappeared, would our community say, oh man, what are we going to do without him? Or would they not even notice? That is why we want to impact our community. So that public school project is coming up because as hot as it is right now, we're thinking ahead, and it's going to be before we know it, kids are going to need sweatshirts, they're going to need jackets. And I think we gave away 50 coats last year at T.H. Harris as well. So that was really fun. And they even posted about it on their Instagram. So that was just cool to see kids coming in one at a time, trying on jackets. Oh, man, so fun. New Orleans Mission is another one of our closest partners that we work with so much. How many of you, sometimes your heart is pulled when you see homeless people and people begging on the side of the road, but you don't know what to do because I don't want to give them money because I don't want it to be, drugs or drinking. Anybody else feel that way? That's part of why we partner with New Orleans Mission, because we have a serious issue with homelessness here. Everywhere that it's warm, you have that issue because people can sleep outside. But the partnership with New Orleans Mission is leading people into a different kind of life, not just providing a meal, providing a bed, but discipleship and helping to redirect and rearrange people's future through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Church Multiplication Network is one, and some of these have been partially funded, but not fully funded, is where we are helping to plant churches all over the country. And the last one I want to mention is Second Harvest Food Bank, which is our food bank right here in New Orleans. I heard Friday on the radio, right now, with the way that grocery prices have been and all that, 1 in 5 Louisianans are using a food bank. So it is a critical time for us to partner with our local food bank. So I want to talk this morning about a parable. Those are just a few of our projects that you can look in the guide. You can look up on the QR code. You can see all the rest of the projects. But these are things that we try to fund that stuff before we do our internal projects because we've made commitments to them and we want to honor that. I want to talk this morning about a parable. How many of you spent time this week thinking about time? I did, but not like long-term time, more like, oh, I don't have time. Do I have time to do that? We think of time in minutes and hours, but we don't always think of the long game, the long term. And we tend to live our life like we're going to be around forever. So we start a 10-year project. Or I have friends that they plan their vacation 2 years in advance. Or we buy a house with a 30-year mortgage. And then we go to a funeral, or somehow life smacks us in the face and reminds us that life does not last forever. And at the end of life, people are not saying, man, I wish I'd bought more clothes. They're not saying, I wish I had another car parked in my drive. They're saying, could I have done more? Did I make a difference? And the end of our lives reminds us that our time is limited and our opportunities are not endless. And that's what this parable of Jesus that we're about to look at reminds us, that we have limited time and limited opportunity. So a parable is just a made-up story that kind of tells an important truth. And Jesus has been described as a master storyteller. It's part of how we know that the Gospels are true, because the stories are so fantastic that somebody had to actually tell them. Has anybody here ever met an unhappy, discontent, difficult to get along with wealthy person? You ready? Huh? Of course we have, yes. And sometimes it's like, what are you so upset about, man? You got a beautiful house, you got 5 cars. I mean, what is it, bro? Jesus is going to explain in this story how that happened to this guy and how to keep that from happening to you. Not the rich part, but maybe the discontent, unhappy part. So starting in Luke 16, we're going to look at this verse by verse, starting in verse 1. Luke 16:1, Jesus told his disciples, that might have just been the 12 guys around him or a larger group, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So this rich guy has an estate manager, and he's not really paying attention to the books and the activities. He's just kind of living the good life because he trusts this guy, because an estate manager has the authority, and he actually has the signet ring to buy and to sell and to trade and do business in his master's name. The manager had been mismanaging his master's possessions. And that doesn't mean that he was necessarily doing something criminal, but he was irresponsible and mismanaging the resources. And this had kind of become public knowledge, and eventually it gets back to the boss. And so in verse 2, he calls him in, and he asks him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can be my manager. You cannot be my manager any longer. So what he's saying is, your behavior has damaged your reputation and mine. So I want you to take the time to get the book straight, get it together, let me know kind of where things are at, and then you can't work for me any longer. So now we kind of get to look, because it's a made-up story, we get to look into the understanding of the dishonest manager. And the manager says to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. So he realizes he only has a little bit of time and a little bit of opportunity left to plan for his future. And he still has the signet ring, and he can still do business in his master's name, because this guy is completely dependent on him. So just to understand a little bit about kind of the social structure at that time, ancient society did not have a middle class. You had your wealthy landowners and your merchants that kind of controlled the shipping. They basically controlled everything. And then you had your day laborers, and that was like Jesus's father was either a carpenter or a stonemason. He was a day laborer. And then you had freed people who had been slaves, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, and then slaves. So a libertini was an enslaved person who had been freed, and they probably had gained freedom by doing work or having like a special skill, and they had become so important to the function of the business of their master that they gained their freedom. And they were often educated or skilled, and that made them valuable. So the problem with this was that these freed workers were still entirely dependent on the goodwill of that family that was their master's family. So if they lost their position, there were no contracts. They had to keep the kids happy. They had to keep the wife happy. They're just like kind of playing this game, trying to do the best they can at their job, because if they're out, and nobody's going to hire them. There's no chance for future employment. That would be difficult. So that's how we can understand the urgency behind the manager's actions. So he's like, I'm not good at digging. He's like, I'm too old, or I'm not in good enough shape to be doing the manual labor. So that means I'm about to become a beggar. So now, like, everyone in Jesus' audience is leaning in. And why is this dishonest manager the focus of this story? So the manager says to himself, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. And so he plans to secure future relationships so that he doesn't lose his position. So in verses 5 and 6 says, he called, and each one of his master's debtors, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? I know that, I've talked to you about this. I'm kind of behind, but right now I owe him 900 gallons of oil. And Jesus used like big illustrations. Like, this is a lot of money, a lot of oil. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down, cut it in half. We're going to let you do it for $4.50. And the guy is like, wow, thank you so much. That's amazing. If there's anything you ever need, you know how it works in business. So then he asks the second, and how much do you owe? And he says, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat. And he told him, take your bill and make it 800. So he's going through vendor by vendor, debtor by debtor, and just slashing what they owe. Just because he's a smart, shrewd manager and he wants to make friends so that he's not begging on the street. So it creates gratitude, goodwill with the debtors, and we're pretty sure he's done this like over and over. So at this point, the audience, this guy is like, not only was he mismanaging, he is like dishonest, and he is like doing something that is really kind of crooked, right? And so they're expecting the manager to condemn him, or the master to condemn the manager. But Jesus, because he's a master storyteller, takes it in a different direction. Verse 8, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Okay, what? Oh, sometimes the Bible, I don't get it, but Jesus died and rose himself from the dead, so okay, I'm going to accept it. I believe it. The master commended the dishonest money manager for taking full advantage of his limited time and his limited opportunity. So now Jesus starts to address the audience directly. He says, for the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. So in ancient thought, and actually there are so many people like this today, they saw life as like this is all there was. There wasn't really a concept of eternity, heaven, hell. It was like maybe like you die and go to Sheol, and that's just probably a really bad place, and everybody goes to the same place, and it's pretty miserable. So there wasn't like a sense of like afterlife. So they acted urgently because like this is it. All they got is this life. People of the light are those who believe that this life impacts the life to come. So Jesus is challenging believers to live with eternal perspective. And here's the lesson from the dishonest money manager. Luke 16:9 says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Okay, now this is like kind of mind-blowing. So worldly wealth comes from a Greek phrase that's often translated as unrighteous mammon, okay? But what that basically means is like material resources in this present world system. So, I mean, that can be money, right? That can be possessions. That can be a car, a house, a boat, property, jewelry. It might be your bobblehead collection or, whatever, your possessions. Your material resource, it might be stuff you've got in a safe deposit box, might be investments, your 401k. And, we're not just talking about someone you would consider rich. We all have something. And, I mean, the good thing about the day and age that we live in the United States, most of us are planning to run out of life before we run out of stuff. So this is why you have a will, because you're going to still have stuff when you run out of life. And what this is talking about is you can't take that stuff with you, right? I remember as a little girl hearing this evangelist named Lowell Lundstrom. He sang country western songs, and he had written this song called, "Oh, you've never seen a hearse with a U-Haul trailer trucking on down the road," right? You can't take it with you. You can't have your stuff loaded into U-Haul and take that into eternity. But what Jesus is saying is that you can use your earthly wealth to gain impact for people in eternity.
Yeah.
You're going to leave stuff behind, so use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. He's not talking about when the job is over. He's not talking about when you're gone and you move to somewhere for retirement. He's talking about when you're dead and gone. Like, when it is over, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. So he's talking about earthly wealth affecting eternity. Whew, it's like so big. We can use our worldly wealth in a way that results in people being with us in eternity. There may be people in eternity who welcome you or welcome others because of the generosity of how they got to Christ. So this is what it means to be a kingdom builder. We are not building a kingdom of this earth. We're not trying to build, I love America and I love being an American, but we're trying to build an eternal kingdom, a kingdom that we do not see. Money is a temporary means to an eternal end. And Jesus views money and possession as temporary tools. These tools can produce eternal results. So if you're sitting in this church right now, you're actually an illustration of what Jesus was teaching. Because if you came to faith through a church or this church or a different church, or you came to faith through a camp or maybe through a campus ministry or an event, you are an example of this teaching. Someone gave a resource of their worldly wealth to create an environment where people encounter Jesus. They understood this idea, and that impact can be extended to your children and your children's children. I had an experience just a couple weeks ago that I just can't stop thinking about. A little boy in my son's class, his little best friend. I've gotten together a couple times with them because they were moving back to San Diego, and the mom is from Baton Rouge, and we've done some play dates. And one day I said something about, I went to college in Minneapolis. And she's like, "You went to college in Minneapolis? Was it a Christian college?" "Yeah, it was a Christian college." "Was it a music college?" Actually, yeah, it was. I had a friend that went to college in Minneapolis. Her name was Amy Landry. Any chance you knew her? And I was like, oh my word, I went to school with Amy Landry. Amy Landry, 35 years ago, as a senior in high school, led this woman to the Lord. And here we are, 35 years later, she's still serving the Lord. Our boys go to school together. Is that not mind-blowing? And that's just in this earth. So she, as a high schooler, understood the impact of using her influence and using her resources for eternal good. It just blew my mind. That impact now has extended to her child. And it's going to extend to her grandchildren. And that's how it is with many of you who came to the Lord as a result of someone helping to create an environment where you could come to the Lord and your children, your grandchildren are serving the Lord. So when we read this, and as I've been praying over this passage and preparing this message, I really have just felt the Lord asking me, Kristi, do you want more stuff? Or do you want more stories? Do you want more stuff or do you want more stories? Because generosity can impact individuals and families for generations. What an opportunity. But we've got limited time and limited opportunity. You know, when you go to a funeral, people don't talk about, they don't say things like, man, she had the most beautiful dining room set, matching chairs. Don't do that. They don't say, boy, he did really well with his 401k. Really, prioritized it, did the maximum match. No, that's not what they talk about. They talk about personal impact. They talk about character, faithfulness. I remember when Gail's husband passed away and his kids just talked about how kind and how much he was there. They talk about their dad. They talk about their mom. They talk about how they were loved, how they loved well, how they were a person of character and compassion and generosity. And you know what? Every person in this room has a little bit of time, a little bit of stuff, some kind of home, car, cash, something. And to play back the words of Jesus, we have an opportunity to turn earthly wealth into a heavenly welcome. And the question for us today is, God, how can I use my stuff to create more stories? Jesus goes on to say this in Luke 16:10. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And the common assumption that we have a lot of times, people think, if I had more, I would give more. But you know what? Statistics show us that is not actually true. That the more percentage-wise, the more people make, the less they give. Faithfulness begins with what a person already has. And listen, I know it is not an easy season. I know to some extent we kind of always feel that way, but I know that it is a tough season in a special kind of way right now. Gas is high. Groceries are high. Like I said, we have a lot of people that are utilizing Second Harvest and things like that. I remember as a little girl, my dad was the district youth director in Minnesota. And that meant he got to preach in all the churches that were part of the assemblies, which is the denomination that we're part of. And so every weekend we loaded up and we went to some little church. We went to Hastings. We went to Bemidji, which was like 4 hours away. We went to wherever the start of the Mississippi is, Mindabed, I don't exactly remember. It was like all these little churches all the time. And they were all kind of the same. They were this just little frame with a little vestibule, and they had pews on both sides and a little platform, and then they all had a basement, because up north you can have a basement, and they had like kind of a little fellowship hall and some Sunday school classrooms. And as I got older, I realized all those buildings had been built in the 30s. You know what happened in the 30s? The Great Depression, the worst time, the time when people literally had to put their children on a train and give them away. There was no food. There was no work. Something like a third or a fourth of all of the population lost their house. Like, it was the worst time. And out of their need, people gave and built something that lasted for eternity. So he says in Luke 16:11, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Because see, money is not just a tool. It is a test of our heart. Our stewardship reveals our devotion. What we do with what we have shows whose we are. And you know what? This is not my church. It's not Pastor White. You can't imagine how many times people say, oh, are you the owner of Saints Community? Oh my gosh, no, I'm not the owner of Saints Community Church. Churches don't have owners. You know why? Because this is the Lord's church. We're just stewards. That's all we are. We just have a responsibility. All we are is this manager. That's it. It is not our stuff. It is not my house. It is not my church. It is not my car. Everything I have belongs to him. And anything that we're giving to him, we're just re-gifting because he's already given it to us to begin with. Our financial choices reveal which kingdom we are most devoted to. Money becomes evidence of ownership and surrender. Jesus says in verse 12, and if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Jesus asks, who will give somebody property of their own if they're not trustworthy with someone else's property? We are the managers in this parable. This dishonest manager, he's handling property that did not belong to him. And you know what we have? Just like him, we have a little bit of time and a little bit of opportunity to create stories with his stuff. It's his stuff. People will be impacted locally and globally. Some of them you will never meet on this earth, but you will meet them in eternity. There's 3 kinds of giving that we emphasize related to kingdom builders. One of them is planned giving. That's faithful giving on a regular basis. And especially here in this Meadoway location, we have many, many, many people that faithfully give $50 a month, $100 a month, $300 a month. And we are so grateful for that faithfulness, that steady plotting, that steady faithful giving that enables us to know that when there's a crisis that we can help meet it because somebody is giving regularly. There's also creative giving. Creative giving means finding ways to give beyond normal means. If you got stuff, you know one of my favorite ways? Selling my stuff on Facebook Marketplace. You remember that commercial that said, for everything else, there's MasterCard. Well, now I've changed it. I just said, for everything else, there's Facebook Marketplace. I mean, anything and everything you could ever not need, you can find there. And there's a profit to be made selling stuff there. So turning that into like a fundraiser, into a way that you're able to dream of giving an offering that you can't give under normal circumstances. Our fantasy football leagues are on track to raise $5,000 this year because it's a hobby that several people have turned into a Kingdom Builders project. I remember, y'all know Papa G, Pastor Gogan, that comes and preaches here usually about once a year. I remember about 10 years ago, or maybe 12, he just got it in his heart to give this, it was a little church here in New Orleans, to give them $10,000. And he'd never given an offering that size in his life. And, I've seen people where like big amounts come in and they, special things happen that they didn't expect. But Papa G is one of those people that like, he's just a faithful plotter. And he went out and he preached extra services, and his wife Bonnie worked extra shifts as a nurse. And they gave that sacrificial $10,000 offering. And he just was so grateful to be able to do that. So maybe there's a creative thing that God's putting in your heart. You're hearing this and you're like, I want to do more. I want to help be a part of meeting that need. And there's dream giving. Dream giving is supernatural giving from God's abundance. And it's some places in the Bible, it's literally called hilarious giving because it's just so nuts. It's just so crazy. But when we open our heart to God, people dream. We dream of retirement. I dream of retirement. I'm not going to lie. I dream about it every day. Every single day. Like, I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm not afraid to say that, like, it's something my husband and I have prioritized. But I've said, Lord, I don't just want to dream of my dreams for me. What do you want me to dream of giving? What kind of dreams can I have as I get older and I stretch that muscle? What else can I do? And you're hearing these projects. Maybe God is pulling on your heart. Maybe you've had a business that went better than you expected, or you've had a financial event, and you're listening to the message to your day, and you're thinking, I want to do more. I just want to tell you one final story. There's a man, we always called him Uncle Stan. he and his wife were like my parents' best friends. They're just really good, solid lay people, church people in the church. I grew up in a church that was a lot like First Assembly. It was just a legacy Assemblies of God church. And Stan and Karen were part of that church. And they just were always generous. They had a beautiful home. It wasn't lavish, but it was nice, and had big spaces for entertaining. And they would always do the young adult groups there and small groups, and they'd have all the parties, and they had a above ground pool, and they even did baptisms there. They helped my sister and her husband plant a church, and then they helped him plant another one. They just were faithful people that like came alongside and always were looking for some way to give. They even hosted my family when we came back on furlough and we had renters in our house. We lived in their basement for 2 months. It's a lot to have a family of 4 living with you. I was thinking about it this week as I was planning. I was like, that's a lot. We've had a lot of people live with us, but not like a whole family like that. And they just enjoyed it, and we just laughed a lot and had good times. And in 2010, we were getting ready to move here. In 2010 was like, if you remember, it was not a great time financially. It was like things had hit rock bottom in 2008, and they were still pretty much there. But like that was the time that the Lord had ordained for us to come here. And we just were staying at their house, and Uncle Stan just said, what are you guys praying about? He was just such a man of prayer, just a good man. Cliff actually reminds me a lot of him. And Wayne said, well, we really need to sell our house, and we've got to raise this budget to be able to start the church. And I think he said something about we need like $20,000 in the next month or something like that. And we were like, our house had been up for 6 months, and we were feeling the pressure. I mean, I'm walking around the neighborhood repenting, Lord, I'm sorry we bought such a beautiful house. I mean, anything. I mean, just the market was terrible. And Uncle Stan had a check in his pocket that was for a piece of machinery that his sons had borrowed money from him that he'd taken out of his own retirement. And so that check was to put that money back in. And I was like, Lord, that's to pay that back. And he felt like the Lord said, give that. And so he talked to Auntie Karen, and they gave us $20,000. And I'm telling you, that $20,000 was instrumental in us being able to leave Dallas and come here. We got a contract on our house the next day. And at that time, Uncle Stan was 68. He had retired from 3M. He actually designed, the little honey bear that you buy at the store. That was his first thing that he did at 3M. He designed the little plastic honey bear. So whenever you see one of those, whenever I see it, I think of Uncle Stan. And he'd retired, and he had his, retirement, and he was helping his sons with their business. And a couple of months after that, it was like a year after that, he was helping my sister and brother-in-law plant this church, and they were buying a building. And he felt the Lord say, just empty out with 401k. And he was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to do it. And he gave all of it. And after that, he got a dream. He got a dream to give $1 million before he died. And he was like, Lord, if you give it to us, we'll give it away. And so he's helping his sons with their company. And I remember years that when you own a small business, you got up years and you got down years. And I find even our top givers, everybody goes through hard seasons. And I remember years where they went out to the back acres and cut down a Christmas tree from their property and brought it into the house. Like that's what they had for their tree. So they were tight years. But that year, his son had a dream in the night about, they did this special kind of paneling that was, and Chad had a dream in the night about how they could do these little holes. And these are people that are just submitted to God and saying, Lord, help me solve this problem. And they started selling that paneling like just crazy. They sold it for the restaurant at the top of the new Freedom Tower where the World Trade Centers were. They sold it to Apple headquarters in Cupertino. And money just started pouring in. And Stan and Karen just started giving it out as fast as it was coming in. Giving it to missions projects, giving it to their church. And In 2020, he came down with COVID, and Auntie Karen took him to the hospital, and we never saw him well again. He passed away. It's long, difficult. And in those 10 years, between the time he was 68 and 78, he didn't give $1 million. They gave $2 million. These were like regular middle-class people who kept dreaming and kept giving and kept stepping out and kept obeying. And he said to us at one point, I just realized that the reason God gave us what he did is because he could trust us to give it back. And he was just so humble. Like, he just said it in just such honor and humility. And I just share that story to say that God will always give more through you than he'll ever give to you if you will obey. And there's nothing more fun. There's nothing greater than giving. You're not too young. You might be a kid or a teenager or a college student. You're not too young. You're not too young to dream of giving. You're not too old to dream of giving. You don't have too little education. You don't have too little in your bank account. You don't have too many responsibilities. You don't have too many people depending on you for payroll. You don't have... God can use what you have and multiply it over and over. We have a little bit of time and a little bit of opportunity to invest and use our wealth to impact what Jesus values most. And you know what that is? People. It's people. And the question for us today is, do you want more stuff? Or do you want more stories? And through generosity, we can see the Lord turn earthly wealth into eternal stories. We'll ask you to stand together. Let's stand. You know, I think I grew up so much in church hearing, time is short, time is limited, that I've always said, there's time. There's time to do everything God calls you to do if you do it in his time. And I still believe that, but I'm turning 50 this year. And all of a sudden, like, I have that sense of like, there's not as much time. There's limited time. And there's limited opportunity. And along with Pastor Wayne, we've just been asking ourselves, Lord, what do you want us to do with the time and the opportunity that we have in front of us? That's what I want you to do today. I want us to can we just spend 3 minutes and just kind of come forward and just as a sign of like, Lord, I just am open to hear what you want to say. Can we just respond? Come on, let's just come up. Just come up to the front. Let's just respond and be together. I just want each of you to ask the Lord, what do you have for me to give this year? What do you want me to do? Show me what's in my hands, Lord. Show me what you want to do. Jesus, I just thank you so much for every person standing here. And Lord, all we have is what you've given us. I just pray that you would take it and you would use the limited time and the limited opportunity that we have to do something eternal, Father. Just ask it in your name.
Thank you for tuning into our service. We hope that the message truly impacted your life. If you're new to Saints Community, we'd like to invite you to fill out a Connect card using the link on the screen so that we have the opportunity to talk with you. You can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Saints Community Church to stay connected and to see what God is doing. We hope to hear from you soon. God bless you.